This week on Government Matters, the CDM, a $6 billion contract, will help Homeland Security prevent cyber intrusions.
At the Unmanned Systems Convention, you'll see the latest technology. I'm Hatzel Vela. I'll tell you why it's moving away from the defense industry and into the commercial industry.
Washington, D.C. plays host to cutting-edge drone technology. We have an in-depth report.
It is interesting that he used that phrase, risk of unauthorized disclosure. A lot of people assume that instead of that, he would use the language attack on civil liberties, constitutionality.
A White House memo calls on a group of outside experts to review government surveillance. How will it impact federal contractors? Government Matters starts right now.
From ABC 7 and News Channel 8, this is Government Matters.
Thanks for joining us. Government is the engine that runs this city. That's why Government Matters. Every Sunday, we'll bring you the week's top headlines in tech, security, and management. I'm your host, Morris Jones. For the second time this year, the Energy Department has been hacked. CNET reports the agency notified workers on Wednesday that a hack in late July exposed their personal information. That includes the names and social security numbers for as many as 14,000 people. The DOE email says no classified data was targeted or compromised, and that agency officials are working with the police. The first hack in February compromised the personal information of several hundred people. This week, the IRS joined a long list of agencies that have cut their number of previously announced furlough days. The agency says cost-cutting measures will allow them to stay open on Friday, August 30th, just ahead of Labor Day weekend. Officials say they will also decide if they need to retain an extra furlough day in September. To recap, the IRS originally scheduled 5 furlough days. Now, employees might only end up with 3. They're one of several agencies that found savings. The Pentagon cut projected furloughs of civilian workers from 22 days down to 6. The National Security Agency will eliminate 90% of its system administrators. It's a move aimed at improving security in the wake of historic leaks by former contractor Edward Snowden. Snowden was one of about 1,000 admins who helped run the agency's networks. The Wall Street Journal reports the NSA will now use OpenStack, a private cloud similar to IT operations at Amazon and Google. This week, the D.C. Convention Center hosted the largest unmanned systems conference in the world. More than 600 exhibits from 40 countries showed off the latest drone tech by land, air, and sea. We sent our own eye in the sky. Hatzel Vela reports.
They're getting smaller and smaller. All types of unmanned vehicle systems known on the street as drones were the highlight on the convention floor. Some of them are already being used. Look at the spinning globe.
We're like a police helicopter in a sense.
A much smaller chopper with immense capabilities called the Kestrel. It is a wide area surveillance system that helps track people and vehicles in a city-sized area like D.C. Attached to a blimp, it is the only 360-degree surveillance system that can help in areas with heightened security, threat detection, and real-time tracking capability. Right now, it is being used in 12 military bases in Afghanistan, constantly looking for trouble.
You have to watch everywhere all the time because you don't know when they're gonna pop out and blow up an IED or something like that.
If an explosive device goes off, the user can split the screen and figure out who pulled the trigger. On another window, they can see where the bad guy is headed.
In a gunfight, we can tell them where the other guys are and where they're moving.
Domestically, Logos, a Virginia-based company, has tested the system on the U.S.-Mexican border.
We can camp over a near border urban area and watch days to weeks of the network of the drug trade, so that instead of getting the low-level guys that are just bringing backpacks of marijuana across the border, we can eventually get to the head of the network, which is clearly where you want to be.
During the demonstration near Nogales, the system helped border officers make more than 100 arrests in a 1-week period. Now, more and more of this technology is being used in the commercial sector. For example, some of these robots are used at nuclear facilities. The attached cameras help workers get into dangerous places.
We're just really kind of at the cusp of seeing what the potential for this technology is.
As the Obama administration draws down troops overseas, the need for this technology is popping up in other industries.
Oil and gas monitoring, environmental monitoring, mapping, surveying, the list goes on and on.
The annual conference hopes to continue to teach the benefits of the technology by showing people what it looks like and how it works. In Washington, Hatzel Vela for Government Matters.
The General Services Administration has already been hit with 2 protests over its multi-billion-dollar Oasis contract. Federal News Radio breaks it down like this. AAI and Company, a D.C.-based firm, filed an agency-level pre-award protest. They think part of the contract restricts competition. A second company, U.S. Falcon Inc., filed their objection with the Government Accountability Office. They have a problem with the terms of solicitation. On Tuesday, a big appointment by CACI International. The company chose Dave Winogren to serve as vice president for their Enterprise Technologies and Services Business Group. Winogren retired from the Department of Defense this summer as Assistant Deputy Chief Management Officer. He's also a former Navy CIO. We'll turn from headlines to tech straight ahead on Government Matters. Homeland Security wants to give civilian cyber defenses a boost. They will pay 17 companies about $6 billion to do it. The ins and outs of the CDM program next. In Tech Matters, the Department of Homeland Security's $6 billion continuous monitoring contract. This week, 17 companies won blanket purchase agreements, each with a 1-year base and 4 one-year options. Joining me with the details this Sunday on Government Matters is Nick Wakeman, Editor-in-Chief of Washington Technology Magazine. Nick, what is this contract? Put it in plain English for us.
Well, this contract really represents kind of the new wave in how people want to manage cybersecurity and their threat. Traditionally, you have a lot of what they call point solutions, which are kind of individual little tools that, are working to, do antivirus work and patching and things like that. And they collect a lot of information, but they don't really share it. So what this contract is designed to do is allow agencies to put in some of these newer tools and techniques to collect all that information and to feed it into dashboards so they get a more holistic view of what's going on in their networks. It's really kind of borrowing a little bit from the military in a way, kind of looking at cyber as kind of a battle space. So you kind of need to know, where your friendlies are, where your enemies are, where your strengths and weaknesses are, and then collecting that information will help you make better decisions and set priorities.
It's a good point. It is a battle space. This is a new war we're waging.
Absolutely.
And now this is a DHS contract, but GSA will administer it. Is that unusual?
Well, it is and it isn't. I mean, GSA is the procurement agency for the government, so it's not unusual for other agencies to come to use them to buy the things they do. But the thing that makes it a little unusual is that DHS is a very large agency and has had a very successful procurement shop of its own. But they've struggled a little bit over the last year or so to kind of get their own large contracts out the door. So they had to turn to GSA, and plus GSA has really stepped up its marketing and other efforts of reaching out to agencies and offering them services and things like, hey, let us do it so you don't have to do the contract yourself. So, but it was interesting to see DHS not be able to put this out on their own vehicle.
Now, Nick, currently DHS uses an automated intrusion detection system called Einstein 3. In light of this contract, is Einstein living on borrowed time?
No, not really. I mean, Einstein, think about it more as sort of different pieces to the same puzzle. I mean, Einstein is very focused on sort of more the, what I'll call like the external networks that connect the agencies and allow for sharing and things like that, and where the CDM is more internal on the individual agency networks. But they'll fit together and be pulling information in and sharing that information. I mean, these networks are under such attack that you really can't do everything you need to do. So the trend, again, to borrow from the military, is sort of that command and control look, so you can draw that picture, look where your risks are, and move from there.
Now, you wrote an op-ed about the CDM this week. I'd like to read an excerpt. Quote, does anyone remember the iAssure contract led by the Defense Information Systems Agency? It had a $1.5 billion ceiling and was won by 11 companies in 2000. It never lived up to expectations and was allowed to quietly expire. Other contracts filled the need. What are you getting at here?
Well, part of that is me being a little cranky, I guess, but also there's so much hype when these big contracts come out. I have no doubt that this is the right direction for the government to go in, and that they're going to be, developing these kind of automated tools and things. Whether this is going to be the contract that's going to do it or not, that's the bigger question. DHS, I'm trying to get more into their strategy. I think once it sort of clears the bid protest period, which will be over the next couple of weeks, and if they get through that, I mean, DHS will probably very quickly come out with a couple task orders, and they'll be the first users of their own contract. And I think with that, they'll have some lessons learned, some test cases that'll help convince other agencies to use it. But so I'm cautiously optimistic, but I think it's good to kind of, you know, it's a big dollar figure, but to sort of still kind of tap down the hype around it.
It's always good getting your insight. Nick Wakeman, editor-in-chief of Washington Technology Magazine. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks.
We'll turn from tech to security straight ahead on Government Matters. The White House wants a group of outside experts to shape the future of government surveillance. But just how much control does Intelligence Director James Clapper have over the process? I'll sit down with FedScoop's Corey Bennett next. In security matters, the future of government surveillance. This week, President Obama signed a memo that asks Intelligence Director James Clapper to establish a group of outside experts to review U.S. surveillance technologies. Obama wants a report within 60 days and recommendations by mid-December. For more, we turn to our guest on Government Matters, Corey Bennett. He covers national security and cybersecurity for FedScoop. Corey, let's start with some background on this memo. What led to this and why was it released?
Basically, it's Barack Obama's turn to respond. The public has certainly had their chance to respond. Congress has responded. There have been high-profile hearings, one on the Hill side, one on the Senate side. Legislation has been proposed. The Hill proposed an amendment to essentially eliminate the surveillance program. It failed by a narrow margin. And the Senate has proposed bits of legislation to both increase transparency and to change the way the programs are run. So right now it's down to how the president is going to respond, and I think that's the reason he weighed in on this issue Friday.
I'd like to read an excerpt from that memo. Quote, "The review group will assess whether the United States employs its technical collection capabilities in a manner that optimally protects our national security and advances our foreign policy while appropriately accounting for other policy considerations such as the risk of unauthorized disclosure." Well, let's talk about that last line in particular, the risk of unauthorized disclosure. Is that directed at the contracting community?
We can't be certain, but it is interesting that he used that phrase, risk of unauthorized disclosure. A lot of people assume that instead of that, he would use the language attack on civil liberties, constitutionality, but he didn't go there. And so it is, some people are interpreting this as a call for a leak investigation. The Obama administration has been widely criticized for its very stringent prosecution of government employees for leaks. You know, the Espionage Act, implemented way back in 1917, had actually only had 3 cases where someone had, or a government employee, excuse me, had been found guilty under the Espionage Act. In the Obama administration, there have been 7 cases brought under the Espionage Act. And so some people are seeing that language as a call for a leak investigation.
Now, Corey, tell us about this panel. Who will be a part of it, and what kind of criteria will Clapper use to select them?
So again, that's another thing we are not completely sure of. We don't know what authorization this panel will have. We don't know exactly who they're going to pick. But one important criteria is the White House has said that it will not be Clapper choosing the criteria. They have said that it will be the White House in consultation with the intelligence community that is going to be picking this panel. The reason that James Clapper and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence is involved, the White House says, is purely administrative. They said that because this panel will have access to secret security, to classified documents, that they will have to go through James Clapper. And that is the main reason that he is involved, not to specifically pick the panel. But again, we don't know exactly who's going to be on this panel and what authority it'll have.
You know, some people in the tech world are not happy about Clapper's role in all of this. They argue that Clapper misled Congress and that choosing him to oversee this process is like having the fox guarding the hen house. Is there some truth to that?
People are upset, and that case you mentioned in front of Congress did lead to one of the greatest all-time phrases, the least untruthful thing, which will go down in history certainly. But there is only truth to this. It depends on who you believe, I guess, is the answer. The White House, as I mentioned, has said that he will have no role beyond an administrative one in this panel. But others argue, privacy advocates, lawyers, argue that the mere involvement of James Clapper and his office in this panel will mean that the panel will lack independence, will lack full credibility, will lack full transparency. So it depends on who you believe on this one.
Right. Well, there's plenty of arguments both for and against. This review group will make final recommendations by December 15th. And then what happens?
Again, something we're not completely sure of what the next step is after that. Obama's outlined the first steps. We're not sure what the next steps are. One interesting thing to look at, though, is how he has approached drone strikes. President Obama made a high-profile speech in late May proclaiming that he was going to take steps to increase transparency for the drone strike program, perhaps to implement more oversight into the drone strike program. And people have criticized him for not following through on those recommendations. Some of those recommendations that he said about drone strikes mirror what he said here about our NSA surveillance programs. So perhaps watching how he moves forward on drone strikes can inform how he will move forward on these NSA steps that he has announced recently.
A lot will be happening on this story. Stay on top of it. We'll have you back on Government Matters for a follow-up. Corey Bennett, national security and cybersecurity reporter for FedScoop. Thanks, Corey.
Thanks so much.
We'll turn from security to management straight ahead on Government Matters. It's a tough concept to grasp, even if you oversee an agency's big data operation. Our data science expert breaks it down into little bites straight ahead. In Management Matters, a how-to guide for agency leaders as they try to craft the right data science team. This year, the Government Business Council, with help from Booz Allen Hamilton, released a study. It finds that only 37% of federal managers think their agency takes the right steps to leverage big data. In fact, only 18% feel proficient in understanding large data sets. At the same time, federal managers know how important big data is. 69% think big data will transform federal operations. Joining me with more this Sunday on Government Matters is Peter Guerra, a data science expert and senior associate at Booz Allen. Peter, do these numbers surprise you?
No, they do not. The big data vendor landscape is huge and it's growing. That ecosystem is very difficult for federal agencies and our clients to parse through in order to be able to understand what the best way forward for them. But I think the important thing to understand is not necessarily to think about big data, but to think instead about big analytics. The analytics is what drives the ability to stitch together different types of data in order to gain the types of insights that federal agencies need to be able to do to be more efficient.
Now, can you cite any specific examples where agencies have used big data to achieve big results?
Yeah, absolutely. When we've engaged with a number of federal government entities that are looking at big data, what we've done is we've gone through a three-step process looking at that with them. We have focused with them on the questions that they want to ask. So what are the top 10 questions within an organization that are going to really drive new insights that are going to help with their mission or their operations? The second is thinking through a data science technology and platforms that will be able to house and analyze that data. And then the third is really focused on the data science teams. How do you get a group of folks who have computer science, math, and statistics, as well as domain experts together in order to be able to answer those questions on the big data platform?
Now, FCW published an article about the subject this week. It suggests some agencies are doing this backwards. Here's a quote. These small teams drive the big data process by being curious and discerning questions that the data could answer even before a big data platform and infrastructure are set up. Peter, how can an agency accomplish that? Do you have some recommendations?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing for agencies to focus on is those top 10 questions that are going to yield the best results for them and to get them best insights necessary for their mission and their operations. For example, looking into fraud within different areas of the federal government can yield huge results in taxpayer savings. And agencies that are able to form these data science teams have the best chance of being able to find those types of insights.
Your study finds that the most common impediment to data collection and analysis is a lack of resources. In this age of austerity, is that an insurmountable obstacle?
I don't believe that it is. While it's true that there is a skills gap and there's a gap in the ability to analyze all of the data, I do believe that data science teams, we've seen time and time again, have more than paid for themselves in being able to give you those insights that yield large savings as well as huge impact within organizations.
Peter, you also recommend a 6 to 9 month rotation of the team's domain specialists. What does that mean and why is it important?
Yeah, it's very important. So the domain experts that give that interpretation of results from the data science team is key to making sure that those insights gained are real and measurable. As well, it's a two-way street. The domain experts can then go back into their organization and tell the rest of the organization the results and show the value of that data science team. As well, for the data science team, the biggest yield that you can get from a team is one that can look horizontally across an entire organization. And by having multiple domain experts rotate in and out, that enables that data science team to see a broader set of challenges and questions.
Big data is a big issue. We'll stay on top of it here. Peter Garrett, data science expert at Booz Allen Hamilton. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you.
We'll turn from management to final matters straight ahead. The BlackBerry, pioneered in 1999, became the dominant smartphone for people on the go. For about a decade, it was also the smartphone of choice for the federal government. In 2007, Apple debuted the iPhone, and BlackBerry never really recovered. Today, the company holds less than a 3% worldwide market share. This week, BlackBerry announced it will consider strategic alternatives like a sale, partnership, or other moves. I'm Morris Jones. Thanks for being with us. Your week is filled with other matters. Save Sundays for us.